Hello and welcome to Lower League Lingo here on All Four Wins Football. We are so close to Christmas, so close to the Christmas break, and equally so close to the FA Cup. There was lots we could have spoken about. We're going to take a look at the whole darn thing, and we're looking at it right after this. Yes, hello. Lovely to see you bop into that as well, Nick. I consistently, it's up there. It's one of the best little jingles I think I've ever heard for podcasts. So I can't help but have a little boogie myself. It's beautiful. There we go, and we are live and ready to go. We are hoping that Mr. Barker will be able to join us shortly and imminently once he's finished being Gordon Ramsay. But whilst we're waiting for him, the pair of us will get ourselves started and see what joys we've got for you. So, Nick, we'll welcome you to the podcast once again. How are you?
I'm not too bad, sir. Not too bad. I am, I'm personally recovering from the lurgy, but looking forward to proving to everyone that I'm not just the Northern Stu, or Stu is not just the Southern me. When we're both on this show together for the first time, that'll be an enjoyable pleasure, I'm sure.
Well, let's hope so. He's got to get here first. Wouldn't that be a thing? If we had booked for the both of you to finally be in the same place at the same time, and then it doesn't quite happen. But let's hope that's not the case. And evening to you, Claire. Lovely to see you too. So we basically thought we'd have a little rundown of sort of where we are. You'll have noticed on the thumbnail, it was a last minute thought to throw in this where the game grows or how we can grow the game sort of thing that the WNL threw out there. And they obviously did that right at the very beginning of the season. That was well documented and well put out there. But there's been quite a lot of changes that have gone on through the WNL. And within that as well, it's a 3-year strategy. It goes through to 2028. So obviously we're not expecting them to have ticked every single box, but you would hope that there would be some bits that have started. And that got us thinking deeper, not just into the WNL, but how's that going to affect tiers 5s and 6? And also, how does the FA Cup and the national game also get into the realms of the lower leagues? It's not an easy discussion to have because there's a lot potentially there, lots of moving parts, and maybe that's part of the problem. But the idea is that we're going to have a little look at it and sort of see what we think and where we are. And we're going to start though with the FA Cup, because obviously the FA Cup is just around the corner. We've got big games coming up, and everybody's waiting, of course, for the big teams to drop into the competition. But
Big teams are already in, Barry.
yeah,
The biggest team's still in there.
well, so you keep trying to tell us, yes. And I know that Gareth and myself and Stu, bless us, we left this competition a while ago. But yes, there is still a team in there who would be seen as relatively big, but they're not a WSL just yet. And those are the ones to which I speak. But I did want to ask your thoughts on the competition as a whole so far. It's been going on all the way from the extra preliminary round all to, up to round 3 as we are this weekend. How has it gone for you this season? Not necessarily just you as Wolves, but the competition itself. How have you enjoyed all of the lower league joys that it brings?
Do you know what? I love the early rounds of the FA Cup, especially when you get teams that you don't know and you can go and visit some different grounds, etc. Which hasn't quite been successful for Wolves this season. It has been last season, for example, when we visited Asforby Amateurs, lovely little ground in Leicestershire near Melton Mowbray. Well worth a visit. So good group of players as well there. So really will give them a shout out. But as a whole, the FA Cup, the magic of the cup comes from visiting those smaller places, doesn't it? And visiting grounds you're not used to, etc. Whether it's be the men's or the women's game, that's what it's about. It's about those sort of little trips out and occasions. And I think last season for Wolves, we got that. This season we haven't. But that's that's just a personal complaint that we've only had the really toughest draws. But looking bigger picture, I think there is therefore a need to start looking at when games get more national, or so we change that regional structure of it, because I think you're looking at, we've played, tier 3 teams, the last two, not so much tier 3s, teams that we play. I say tier 3 because that's what Wolves are in. We're playing the same teams from the same league. If you're a tier 4 team, you're likely to be playing exactly the same teams that you were doing last season in the FA Cup and this season in the league. And I think that freshness of playing different teams does add value to the competition, increases the worth of the competition. I was looking forward to getting joining someone like Royston. I really wanted, not because it was Royston and tier 5, but because it was Royston who we've never played before, and therefore it'd be somewhere completely different as a team for us to go to. And Cambridge United as well, it's different. And that principle of going somewhere different, seeing something different, it's more. I love going down to Sudbury in the League Cup. We'd never played Sudbury before. It was a new experience for all of us. It's great. That's what I like. Make it more, and I appreciate there's a cost impact to make it sort of bigger regions earlier, but therefore that leads us into the prize money, and I think that is going to always be the biggest gripe of this. The prize, the key for any National League team and below is getting into the 4th round realistically, because that's when the prize money does that. When those who've got the deepest pockets join the competition, and therefore they get up, the money kicks in. Whereas at the minute the prize money's not great. I mean, rugby got a grand this season for their FA Cup run. Okay, they're only in one game, but they got Wolves away, so they didn't even get ticket money. They didn't get any revenue in the bar, and then they get a grand to travel to. Okay, it's not too far to travel from rugby up to Wolverhampton, but to cover all their expenses, etc. That's not great. It's Stourbridge a couple of seasons ago, same thing happened to them. They got Wolves away, got a tanking, and went home with a grand in their back pocket. And it's sort of like going. Whereas if they'd been coming in the round before, they would have got prize money then. They might well have got a home game that time. At least they would actually probably make more money by being in tier 4, entering the competition a round or 2 rounds earlier than they did by being in tier 3 and entering in the first round proper. That doesn't make sense. You've got to increase the prize money.
It is a bit of a strange one. I mean, you're not wrong there. But before we press into the prize money and all that sort of thing, Claire's brought up a point that has been mentioned within the group chat as well. Can't believe Wolves.
TV again. TV again.
On the box again. There's lots of other worthy games out there. Now, it's interesting because when we did our FA Cup preview before, I said this would be the game that would go on the TV. I said, if I'm sitting there as a TV mogul trying to think about how am I going to get the most eyes on the product, you want teams. And this is the problem, I think. And it's a problem that as we talk about women's football as a whole, this is going to be one of the issues because they need to be. And I think specifically as well around clubs. So big clubs want their women's team to be playing big club names. So you look at Stevenage, for example, in the Eastern region. Luton Town were in our league. They were the only team in our league that you could probably turn around to every day go into the men's game football fan and say, do you know these teams? They'd have known Royston because obviously they're just round the corner as a local side. But then you've got teams like Dussindale and Hellersden. Now, when they first came up, I had to Google it. I don't know where Dussindale is. I don't know where Hellersden is. And so as a result of that, you struggle. When you look at these FA Cup games that are going on, it's brilliant to have the likes of Southampton against Royston. That's amazing. That's a huge match. But the Southampton fans are sitting there and going, who's Royston? And the people that are going to Southampton are going because they want to watch Southampton. And yes, Royston will take a few, but they're not going to be taking thousands necessarily. And so as a result, you're talking about these games, they've got to have a universal interest. And if you're just passing through the box and you see Southampton against Royston, does it grab your interest? Whereas when you see Wolves v Forest, you might think, hold on a second. So is this part of the issue that we've actually got by saying we're just going to put one FA Cup game on the TV and no highlights? It's not really growing the game as such, is it? Because you need these, you're literally waiting for the heavy lifting of the big names in the men's game in order to put it on the TV, because otherwise I completely agree. And I mean, Bournemouth and Fulham was the other one that was mentioned by
I
the
think,
other lads that are on. So where do you stand on that? Because that is an issue. We're never going to see these lower league teams really if we're constantly waiting for the name of the men's side.
yeah. So I think there's several points. One, it's this round there is two TV games, so it's a northern team or northern fixture and a southern fixture. So it's Palace away to Lewis are the southern fixture, and Wolves obviously hosting Forest in the northern side. I think there's a couple of things that obviously go into it. It's also about, so as you say, the names, yeah, that sort of what's going to attract eyeballs. That is huge. I think the other thing to look at is infrastructure of grounds, and I'll Gareth will probably say Wivenshaw probably could cope with it, but there's certain some of the other non-league grounds and I use the term non-league as a broad spectrum, couldn't cope. I mean, we've played not so much in the FA Cup, but in the County Cup. I'll come to that in a second, because I've just seen that point. We played a team called Knoll, who is pretty much a field. Liverpool Feds until this season played in a sports leisure centre, so they don't have the facilities to host the games. Full stop. Feds now do, but some Halifax don't. I'd argue because they are just glorified leisure centres that you play out of. So it's names, it's what's going to do that, facilities. Also, would it grow the game? And I'll take your Southampton Royston as the example there. Would it grow the game watching Southampton spank 8 past Royston? And that's no criticism of Royston, but that's good chance that's what's going to happen.
I mean, I would watch it.
You would watch it because you don't like Royston, but yeah. But principle though, if you're neutral, does that help grow the game? Does that help? Royston going for a day out, and that's no disrespect to them. If they even score, that would be a big event for them. And that's and Wolves have been on the other end. Wolves have been the Southampton in that situation. As I said last season, Ashford B, we beat them 7-1. They celebrated like they won the FA Cup when they scored against us. Cracking goal, well deserved. And our players and management basically went, they deserved it. We've got they're everything they put into it. We deserve that. Yes, we don't want to concede goals, but if we're going to concede a goal, let's have it a magical goal like that in the FA Cup and move on. And that's what matters. That's the magic. So I think those generic points about the FA Cup, I would say, are there. As to Wolves, if you're looking at the northern ties, you've got Durham versus Sheffield United. It's on YouTube anyhow. It's in the Championship, so it's regularly on. Newcastle versus Feds. Again, you sort of is the big name. Would it attract the attention? Burnley versus Posh. That might be one there because Posh are putting a bit of money in it and are pushing for promotion this season. It's then Middlesbrough versus Fylde. Middlesbrough obviously were first round. They were on TV, so on the basis you wouldn't include Wolves, you'd probably discount them. Leeds versus West something or other. West Bromwich. Don't know who they are. I'll be honest. I'd want there to be an atmosphere at the game. There's be some fans. West Brom can't get more than 70 to their home game, so why would you encourage that? Okay, it's a away game. There you go. Birmingham City versus Sporting Calcer. Good derby match, so maybe. Mancunian Unity versus Hull. Again, no disrespect to Mancunian Unity. They'll probably get spanked by Hull. Is that good? Derby versus Sunderland. Again, Derby will get spanked because Derby aren't that great. And don't get me wrong, they'll give teams a good run for their money in Tier 3. And Sunderland, whilst Sunderland aren't doing well in WSL 2, Sunderland should easily beat them. Altrincham versus York. That's your classic FA Cup tie, but we don't see these games getting put onto for the men's FA Cup anymore. So it's unlikely it would do for the women. And then that's it for the Leafield versus Swindon. Technically slips into the south, but that's it in Northern ties. So bar Wolves v Forest. So as a tie that appeals to a huge range of people and would get eyeballs on it from a TV audience perspective and have the infrastructure to support it, and get fans to the ground that therefore would make a bit of noise, bit of atmosphere, be able to see it on camera, and what should be a competitive game, noting the history of the games between these two clubs. I, I have to say, I'm not surprised that Wolves v Forest was picked.
Yeah.
I did expect that we wouldn't get picked because we'd been on and they'd want to circulate it round. And um, I did hear, Claire, it's, obviously it was Middlesbrough in the first round, but I believe that was only because Wolves couldn't host the game anywhere else. So it was supposed to going to be Wolves then as well. So it could have been Wolves in all three rounds if it hadn't been for Telford United getting in the way of the new Bucks head this in the first round. So I am conscious that we have been on TV quite a bit in this competition so far.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, Claire comes out with thinking it should be Sutton against Chatham, and I mean, I see that for the Southern one. As you said, they've gone for Lewis and Crystal Palace, which is a tier 3 against a tier 2. Sutton against Chatham would be a great one. It's tier 5 against tier 4. You mentioned Auctionham for the North. They're the only tier 6 side left in the competition with a chance to play against a tier 4 side. But again, you bring up a good point about you could potentially see one side better another. And Lucy, who suspiciously has got SUFC at the end of her name, and that's always a danger because you could end up, is it Sheffield United, but I think that could be Sutton United as well there.
Yes.
And it's a fair point about wanting to share the money. And Claire saying, to be fair, we'll watch any game, so why not give it to him in his team? I get that, but this is the problem, and this is why we started with the FA Cup in terms of where we are, because we're going to dig into that. You say we'll watch it, but I'll come to that. I'm going to star that just to remind myself, because that to me is a huge point and one that comes up later into the structure of the show that we've planned for you today. But sticking with the FA Cup just briefly now for the sort of the next bit, we've had this conversation. Stu's had his say on this, so I will be intrigued to see what you think. But we've spoken a bit about the prize money, and if you were to enter the Women's FA Cup at the preliminary round, obviously you won £600. The losing club in that would get 150. But there was only about 6 or 7 fixtures, I think. But if you were to win in that and get through the first, second, and the third round of qualifying, that earns you £9,400, which is a reasonably tidy sum, to be fair, for most football teams. Equally, if you then continue going from the first round and go to the round 3 and go out, so this particular one at the moment, you're in a situation where you can earn, I think it was, how much was it? 614. £23,000, which is just mad. That's again, it's almost not quite. So I'm not going to start going out with any Aluko mess, but it's definitely over double. So you've got to be careful what you say. You get caught up on everything nowadays. But it's over double what you get for the first bit, and that makes sense. You fully understand why the prize money goes up the further you get at these competitions. But I have 2 things to talk about when it comes to the FA Cup and the prize money and the structure. I think that you need WSL sides to come in earlier. I think bringing them in at the 4th round is silly. I don't think I understand why they do it, but ultimately those clubs are going to come in the 4th round and they're going to do reasonably well, and they knock out a lot of the teams below. They do it quite early on in the situation, and what we always talk about is wanting to see more giant killings. You're not going to see them unless you get the opportunity for the smaller clubs to play the bigger clubs, and you don't really get that opportunity when you consider how few there's going to be. The WSL clubs come in to the next round and there's going to be 20 teams left from an entire competition, and the WSL2 clubs are only just coming at this round. So they're going to make a big thing on that. So that's my first one. But the second one on this is when you start talking about prize money. Ordinarily, I would agree with the fact that women's football has got to stand on its own 2 feet. It's got to become its own animal in that respect and earn its own money and do all of those sorts of things if it's going to get the respects that it truly deserves. And I just don't think in the FA that's the way it needs to be. The FA Cup is for everybody. And you can't tell me as a Man United, a Chelsea, a Liverpool, a Man City, these sort of clubs, they don't need the 4 or 5 million that you get for winning the FA Cup. The money for men's football teams in the FA Cup is not what they're in it for. They're in it for the glory of winning the world's oldest club competition. And for that, I don't think they need him. So for me, I would take all of that and I would happily just make it an even amount for everybody that takes part in the FA Cup. But I would also completely change how the money goes into the clubs, because the purpose of the FA is to grow football. So I would actually put it backside over face. I would put it so you get more money at the beginning than you do for getting through, which I know sounds really counterintuitive and really stupid, but it means you're going to give more money to more teams, meaning they've got more chance of succeeding. And when you look at the lower leagues of women's football, how many clubs are going bust? How many clubs aren't doing well? So for me, I would increase the money that you're getting there. And yeah, it's about the glory. If you won the FA, you really care at that point about a little bit extra, because you should potentially have already had it earlier on in the competition. So I'd be really intrigued to see what your thoughts are on when the WSL team should come in and just prize money in general for the FA Cup.
Cool. Just before I do that, just quickly, my pick of the tie for the Southern League TV game was the Bournemouth versus Fulham game. That would have been a proper humdinger. That would be mine rather than those Palace. But there we go. When should the FA Cup? When should the WSL teams join the FA Cup? I think I would go with the. Cheers, Lucy. And good luck in the FA Cup. Really good to see you.
Not at all embarrassing. Just a manager. That's all it was. My bad.
And I did wonder whether it was Lucy, the manager, who I think she win Manager of the Month recently as well. Lucy did let us know it was Manager of the Month recently. But anyway, sorry. WSL teams. I think. I agree with you. I think you put it in the third round, like you would, like the Premier League teams do in the men's game. They join in the third round, and as you say, right, saying next round when they join, this is 12 or 32 rather than and that's there's a good chance that all 12 miss each other, face lower league opposition. Great, that's 12 teams in the outside the WSL getting to host non-league, host WSL team or meet WSL teams and experience, etc. But therefore, it could well be that that's 12 WSL teams gone through to the fifth round, and suddenly it's very lopsided towards the WSL teams. And then you can basically just go, well, who's the top 3-4 teams in the WSL? We'll just put them straight into the semi-finals and move on then at that point, because it's all over by the shouting. Whereas if you bring them in at the third round, there's more chances that they'll be facing completely different teams. They'll have to try and go play on different pitches, play in some of these other stadiums, play in not quite as pristine pitches, etc., and actually have to play against some of these teams and actually compete on a more level playing field to an extent, which would be great for the game, and therefore more opportunity for more fans to meet and see these WSL teams in action. And yeah, that would be my view. As for the promotion, as for the prize money, I'm firmly of the view that the prize money, it should be one big pot for the FA Cup, distributed evenly. I think it's something like £2 million per spot in the Premier League is worth for a men's Premier League team. When the FA Cup is, as you say, about £4 million. They ain't interested. As you say, the men's teams are not in the FA Cup to win. They're in it for the money, prize money. They're in it for the place in Europe and the glory of a trophy parade afterwards, and having lifted the FA Cup. That's what they're in it for, not for the money. So distribute it more. You could even, as you say, if you focused it on the grassroots elements of the game, you do that for both the men's and the women's game. You actually increase the investment in grassroots clubs, full stop across the board. So therefore, your Roystons, your Leafields, I'm now trying to think of your Suttons of this world who aren't in the sort of the football league structure, or lower down the football league structure in terms of which division they play in. Get that money coming into them as well, both on the men's and women's side, and invest in the kids, and therefore you get more boys and girls playing football across the board, which your knock-on benefit of that is that you have more teams entering the FA Cup in 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. Because, as you say, we've had teams this year fold, several teams fold in lower leagues. If they're folding because they haven't got the resources, either players or financial, and there's likely to be a bit of a linkage between the two. Whereas actually, if they're getting decent FA prize money, you've got more players coming in, you've got more money coming in, which means you can invest more in the players that do come in and make it worthwhile the players staying and playing, and therefore you can support them, and therefore you enter the competition, you push to get further in the competition because your prize money is worth it, and you're not having to, and you're not losing money when you go out and compete in these competitions. You know, if you were hosting an FA Cup game in the preliminary round, your chances are you might well make a loss. Realistically, 150 if you lose. If you travel, realistically, and you lose, you're almost certainly making a loss because 150 quid won't cover your coach fare. You know, and certainly you've got to pay for if you host the club, you've got to pay for refs as well, things like that. So it is going to start to cost. And as you progress further the competition, if you're struggling with finance, if your finances are tight, is it actually worth you entering the? You look at the competition. You've got a team from the round above, the league above you. You're mid-table, they're top of the table. You know you're going to get smashed. Is it worth you forking out the coach fare when it's a 50 quid fine for pulling out? You've not got 450 quid minus your fees, minus your coach fares, etc. And you've cost yourself 50 quid. But actually, you've got a free weekend, and everyone could go off and have a good weekend, and not come home a bit depressed for having a bit of a tanking. And there's more there that sort of actually let's invest and grow it. Let's make it more worthwhile. And don't get me wrong, I remember what it was like a few seasons ago before these figures came in. And it was atrocious then. I remember Clapton Community Club, they had to go fund me to get down to Plymouth. They'd done really well, but they played away every single home game, every single game in the cup. So they were having to go fund me to just for their travel down there. It's better now than it was, but it's still huge difference. I think that jump from the third round to the fourth round is big. It's second round to the third round, isn't it? Where it becomes big, where it's the once the WSL 2 teams enter, it suddenly goes. Was it? I've just got it here. £8,000 for the winners in the second round, 35k in the third round. That's huge jump. And you've got to pay for refs. It's fourth officials as well coming in the third round, everything like that as well. So you're having additional costs. And in the third round, it goes to penalties as well, extra time, and then penalties. So therefore, you've got additional lighting costs as well because you've got to keep the floodlights on for longer. You've got to have staff on for longer, etc., etc. So there's a real cost implication on clubs at this point. And I think there does need to be more of a push to bring the money up. Certainly, those early rounds in the Women's FA Cup need to. You could double it, and I think it would be across the board in sort of preliminary rounds, second round. I think you would have a huge benefit just without even touching the rest. You would have a huge benefit.
It does. I mean, and it jumps, like you say, massively. But you spoke about Leafield and Swindon. That's an all tier 4 match, and like you should say, that's one of those sides is guaranteed £35,000 at the end of this run. Sutton, who we've just been talking about here as well, obviously would have made about 21,000, I think it is. They would have come in at the second round of qualifying, just like Stevenage did, and 3,000 for that, 4,000 for the third round qualifying, 6,000 for the first round, and then 8,000, as you just said, for the second round there. So they've made 21 grand from that. It's going to be 30,000 if they don't make it past Chatham. If they do get past Chatham, all of a sudden, that's a huge amount of money. And the thing is, this money is really important for these lower down clubs, as we've mentioned. It's so huge because it's an income, and if they know that the money is going to be bigger in these lower rounds, that they can rely on that money, then it becomes a budget. It becomes, right, we know that's coming in. you can't budget for an FA Cup run because you just don't know. Anything can happen. You could draw a side 2 or 3 tiers down from you, and you think, well, that's brilliant, lovely, that's money in the bank. But equally, the opposite could happen. You could end up with one above or one right up at the top of your league, and it becomes a really difficult fight. So you can't budget. It's just a bonus.
Well, as I said about Starbridge a couple of seasons ago when they got us, Rugby this season when they got us, yeah, they would have walked away. I think it's gone up since then, but it's 1,500 this season for losing club. That Rugby got to the same round as us last season, so they got round to the 5th round. So they would have got all the way. Yeah, the best part of 100k last season. This season they've got 1,500 quid. That's you can't, and they've been putting a lot of money in at that club. And for a club that's not associated with a Premier, with a professional men's team as well, they've put a hell of a lot of money in. You can't budget for that. You can't envisage, and they would have envisaged getting to at least the 3rd round. They would have budgeted for getting to the 3rd round, and they've gone out in the 1st, and that's complete. That will have had an impact on their budget for the season coming.
Absolutely. It's huge. So. Yeah. That was a big point that we wanted to bring up around the FA Cup and where we sort of are with it, because things need to change within football. And we know that through the Where Our Game Grows strategy that's been brought up in the WNL, tiers 3 to 6 is going to change. Tier 3 and 4 are going to change massively. We know that in the WSL there's going to be additional teams. It's going to go from 12 to 14. And again, this is where, for me, there's just not been enough conversations between all of the stakeholders. You've got the FA who are running the FA Cup. You've got, the WSL1 and the WSL2. That's a separate entity. You've got the WNL. That's a separate entity. And then you've got all of the regional leagues doing their own thing as well. And as a result, there's not much joined up thinking. So you had this big release where the WNL and the regional leagues were going to change, and it was going to be all singing and all dancing, and there'll be playoffs, and it's going to be this, that, and the other, and it's going to be lovely. Come along and watch it. And then the WSL goes, well, actually, we're going to 14 teams, and everything that's just been decided, you go, well, we'll just rip that up, shall we? Because what we were going to do isn't going to work because we've got to shift loads of people up. And that's exactly what happens. If you lose 2 extra teams in the championship, well, now all of a sudden you've got to fill up 2 more spots from there. That's not too bad. You're only taking 1 from the north potentially and 1 from the south, so that's not a problem. But well, hang on a second, we've now got to stick another team up there into the WNL there. Where do they come from? Which division do we put them from? Maybe we'll come up with a playoff, or we'll do this, that, or the other. And so it played around with what people were hoping to do. And it's a massive thing. And it changes as well then, tier 5 and tier 6, because they've got to push some more teams up in order to keep the WNL just at the level it's already at. And you sort of end up, in a way, it's a good thing because it really pushes up some of the levels. But you look at some of the teams that have gone up into WNL already and seen how they've performed and whether they've struggled or, it can be quite tricky for them. And you just wonder, is it going to be quality or is it going to be quantity as we're pushing these people and teams up if they don't have the money behind them and the backing behind them to really make a go of it? I mean, clubs don't have to do it. They can say, no, we'd rather not go up and we get offered to another side. But again, the competitive part of me finds that really difficult to stomach, because surely the whole point of playing, I mean, you guys would know, you want to go up. You don't want to be sitting there going, actually, do you know what?
Quite like this division.
We're not too interested. Maybe next year. Because what's the point? Why have you bothered busting a gut for an entire season if you were never really wanting to get to the next bit? I always find it strange. You hear it around in Stevenage sometimes, more on the men's side. I would rather not go up because we're not ready for it yet. It's like, but that's not football. The idea isn't supposed to be you're ready for it. The idea, if you can be, superb. But the idea is if you're the best side in your league, you go up. So there's going to be some big changes between tier 3 and tier 6. So my big question, first of all, is do you think there is going to be the quality required within all of these changes to maintain some levels of competitiveness within tier 3 to 6?
Come to that question in a second, because I just want to get a couple points out first. First of all, the FA run both the Women's National League and the FA Cup, and you point out the lack of joint up thinking. I agree. There does appear to be that sort of the FA. Those who run the FA Cup and those who run the National League don't seem to talk to each other quite in the same way. And there's that. What's your impact on this? Where's you think? And if they do talk to each other, there's no sort of thought about sort of that. How do we do what's good for tier 4 and below, or tier 3 and below? And there's no sort of, it's everything seems to be, let's keep the WSL and WSL2 happy. We must, keep them happy. And I think that comes with where the obsession with the revised strategy of the restructuring of the leagues came from, which was, we must produce lots of good England players, and the only way we'll do this is having PGAs play in the National League and everything, and that's how we'll do it. And they didn't actually see the bigger picture. And I think, let's be honest, the FA got their nose put out of joint by the fact that fans and teams didn't sort of jump up and down and go, your ideas are wonderful, FA, we love them, and therefore took the whole lot out as well. And the expansion of the WSL gave them a good excuse to blame it on that. Realistically, that's my personal view. With regard what you said about the sort of your question, going back to that, I think what you'll find is there are teams in the tiers 4 who need to be in tier 3. It rolled back a couple of seasons this year. So prime example is Bournemouth and Exeter, who went toe to toe. What was it, 2 seasons ago in tier 4? Barely separated, and Exeter go up on goal difference or whatever it was, or a couple of points, and it went down to the last game of the season. Great entertainment, but what you then got to remember is Bournemouth hadn't lost the game all season at that point, and still didn't lose the game that game either. They drew it or whatever. They drew it, and they just draw one more game than Exeter basically, for Exeter to go up. And then they went the next season, won every game pretty much, or certainly didn't lose again. And they're too good for their league at that point, because their parent club has put, the men's team has put a lot of money and investment in, which is good. But therefore it makes the rest of the league uncompetitive. So if, you've got nothing to play for if you're outside Bournemouth, and I'm sure she'll let me and say Money's had lots to play for in that season, but principle, Moneyfield we're never going to compete long term through the course of the season with Bournemouth. Whereas you take sort of it's Swindon who are dominating that league now, but you take those sort of Bournemouth and Exeter out of that league that season, it would have made last season a really good competitive league. Swindon and Moneys would have gone for it like they're doing this season and really battled all the way, and it made more teams sort of step up as well. Because the easy option, realistically, if you're chairman or chair of a club in that league, is look at it and go, all we need to do is make sure we finish 10th, okay? Because that's success, because we're not relegated. We're never going to compete with the number 1 team. Actually, anything above 10th is progression as well. So actually, that's fine. I'm not worried about whether we finishing second. You don't gain any more money for finishing second if you finish 10th. So where's that? Once you know you're safe, fine. Take your foot off the gas. Enjoy. We'll rotate players. We'll play youth team. We'll get them experience. It doesn't actually matter where you finish. I know that's a very cynical, negative attitude and goes against the spirit of sport, spirit of football. But that's realistically where we are at the minute with the league. Whereas
this comes down to the money side of it, there, doesn't it? Because you don't get paid per position that you're on. It's just you're either in the league or you're not in the league.
Yeah.
So what you're saying there makes complete sense.
And therefore, so I think this sort of rejig of the teams, removing, hands up, Wolves and Burnley hopefully will be out of the National League Northern next season, which therefore makes it a really good league for your Rugbys, your Stokes, your West Broms next season, because therefore they're not looking at going, well, we're never going to win the league because those two have got occupying the top 2 spots or top 3 spots the last sort of couple of seasons, and just keep on missing out to your Forest, your Newcastles, etc., are actually going to be out of the way. We might win the league now, and similar in the Southern, same principle actually makes it worth teams competing. You might find more owners put more money into it because there's more chance of success, and I think that will happen across the board.
Do you worry that there's going to be a bit more yo-yoing between leagues, particularly in the short term now? Because you'll get teams coming up, and then maybe they're not quite ready for that jump, so they end up coming straight back down. Another team comes in. Are they going to be ready to fill that gap, or do you think that basically what we'll be seeing is like a couple of transition seasons where we're just looking for almost like the next generation of teams that are going to really pump investment into their sides?
I think it will vary league by league and team by team. And I think you'll see, and we still get some teams who yo-yo. Chesterley Street up in the north will have been renowned for yo-yoing for the last few seasons. Cheers, Claire. And others will do similar. I think you'll find. Whereas I think I don't know. I mean, Kiddie is a prime example. Okay, they came up this year, but I think they would stabilise themselves in the league. Kidderminster type team will stabilise themselves in the league, and therefore build going forward because they've got that support and investment. I think, as I said, I think it'll depend team for team. I think your lot in Stevenage will probably do okay. They'll stabilise themselves in the league. It'll be a tough couple of seasons because they'll go from used to winning everything to not winning everything. But actually, I think they'll be able to build. They'll be able to do similar to Luton are doing this season. I think they'll stand them in good stead. So I think there'll be teams. It will vary across the divisions, across the leagues, and will vary. I think the interesting one for me is who goes up from the playoffs out of Tier 4, because I think that's going to be there are going to be some really tasty North East Midlands, South East, South West Tier 4 playoffs there, because the teams in those positions are going to really be humding it because they've been pushing themselves to get Tier 3 promotion, and I think they're going to be really up for it. And that will be those are the Tier 3 playoff. Having gone through a Tier 3 playoff, I don't want to do that. And I think it depends who ends up in that. Fingers crossed it's Burnley who are representing the north in it. I'm going to just be really blunt. Cards on the table, Burnley in the northern half of it. I think the southern, whoever ends up in the southern half it'll be interesting to see how good that game is. Whereas I think where you look at you've got the likes of Wivenshaw, Leeds, Boldmere, Leafield, and Barnsley, sort of in the north, in the Midlands, and Northern. You got Monies, you got Bristol Rovers. Don't call them Bristol Rovers, and you got Norwich, Fulham, in the southeast, southwest. That's going to be there's some tasty games there actually, and it comes back to a point I was making about the FA Cup as well. I would love to see Norwich versus Moneyfields in the FA Cup in an early round, because actually it will be an interesting game to see where a top southwest team is versus a top southeast team. It's far more entertaining and interesting than no disrespect to Norwich versus Sudbury again, or Norwich versus Stevenage. I mean, it doesn't fill me.
But that's another reason why weighting the money to the early rounds really helps, because then you don't have to regionalise it. They are getting enough money to be able to travel, and like Wroxham went off to play York. Now I know that was a huge trip for them, but for me that was absolutely superb, because since when do Wroxham ever get the chance to draw York in any cup competition in the history of the world? It doesn't happen. So I think
clubs can make a thing of that and actually make it right. You know what? We're going to travel up on the Saturday. We'll stay in a hotel. Okay, we're not expecting to stay in the Grand Hotel, the Railway Hotel in Central York or anything. The nice posh one. But it will be the Premier Inn on the outskirts. But we'll go into York for a meal, have a glass of wine with the meal. We'll make an event of it. It's a bit of team building. It's worth it. You could do that. It's interesting. I found out that. I'm going to criticise the club on this one. Actually, I found that Peterborough United are only going up on the bus the day of the game against Burnley, and I think a club like Peterborough United, they should have taken those players up the night before, stuck them up in a hotel, and actually given them no criticism of Peterborough. They're probably not going to progress, and this would have been a really good opportunity for them. And I know the league is their priority, but this would have been a good opportunity just before Christmas to take them away. So, here's a hotel. It's a nice hotel. Everyone's got a bed for the night. Go find somewhere nice, go for a walk, etc. bit of team camaraderie, etc. Before we'd go and play them the next day. That's what I'd have done. And yes, it cost me a few £100 more, but
And that's
actually,
the thing, because you're talking about team bonding there, and that's a really big thing that you can do. But also, you think about like when they take the youngsters to international tournaments, or they put them into first team squads just to get that experience. It's almost like the FA Cup is the conduit for that. It gives them the opportunity to try out and do things as a side that they don't normally do when they're playing in their regional leagues or their regional sort of divisions in that respect. So listen, I'm all for it. I think it would be a really good thing. But while we're talking about that, that helps us move on to the question of revenue. And Claire has put in here, things like, are we going to see that clubs from Premiership teams have an advantage? So teams such as Wolves, Forest, Burnley, Fulham, Brentford, sides that have got that Premiership money, will they start to invest more? And I think that's part of the question. But the other part of the question for me is, where does the revenue come from? And that massively comes into this, which I said I would come back to, which is, to be fair, we're going to watch any game, so why not give it to a minnow team? And this is the big thing. People say, yeah, we're going to watch it, we're going to watch it, we're going to watch it. But let's just take a look at what's happening just this very season. We've struggled. The Champions League went to DAZN. They tried to put it behind a paywall, realised people didn't really want to do it. They weren't ready for it, so they put it back out for free. It went on the YouTube channel. We had the FA Player, which was free. They used to have him football there. Now, you want to watch Champions League? Got to go to Disney Plus. That's it. End of story. If you want to watch it, that's where it is. A lot of the WSL games, there's some on the BBC, but if you're not watching it on there, you've got to be getting Sky Sports. You've got to get these other places. And we're seeing a drop. There was that big talk about the Chelsea against Arsenal game having a massively reduced viewership because it was, well, not necessarily because it was, but it was on Sky, and it was much less than it was when it was on the BBC the previous season by a considerable amount, possibly tenfold, I think, was kind of where we're looking. And so when you start looking at these things and you say these words, to be fair, we're going to watch any game, so why not give it to a minnow team? Sometimes it feels like the answer is we're going to watch it, provided we haven't got to pay for it. And if you've got that as a problem, that's then going to make potentially the companies that are wanting to show it not want to put too much money into the game because they don't think they're going to get the viewership which is required for that to happen. So the money coming into the game, and this is where it sort of links into what was being said by the WNL, where our game grows, because one of the really big things that they were talking about was helping to get clubs that sponsorship, helping them to work with them to be able to find these things and to get money into the game. Are you seeing any of this happen?
So firstly, I'm seeing Wolves' attendance increase. We've had something like a 10 match day attendance this season. So I think there are lots of issues with the attendance figures and the viewing figures on the TV for the WSL games. I don't think it's a straight sort of. It's because it's behind a paywall. I think there's other implications as well. I think it's part of. Don't get me wrong. I do think 11:55 people are doing on a Saturday afternoon. People are doing other things, etc. as well. My one comment to the point about we'll watch any football, give it to a minnow. The TV companies aren't aiming the pick of fixtures at the likes of you and I and yourself, Claire. They're aiming it for a generic neutral who or put back the pub going fan, basically. What's going to be on TV in the pub, right? Well, we'll put Wolves v on the Wolves v Forest on the TV in the pub. Will be fine because you'll find people will watch it. You generic fan just flicking through TV channels. Oh, Wolves v Forest is on. I watch that because I know Wolves, I know a Forest, etc. Your generic TV watching fan isn't going to go Sutton versus Chatham. I'll watch that. It doesn't pique their interest. Comes back to the point we're making about names. so the TV sponsorship, the TV deals, and I think it's good that Channel 4 doing got some of the games from this round onwards. Up until the final, I think the final is BBC, but Channel 4 and TNT have got TV games in all the other rounds. I think that's huge that game is on Channel 4 because it does give you that free access. But again, it's clubs need to be able to sell the teams, and I think yes, the Premier League teams, and I loved seeing that Wolves were being associated with the Premier League. It won't last much longer. It's fine. Don't worry. You'll be in the Championship next season. Clubs just chuck money. There's £500,000 over that. Go and run your women's team. Or here's 100K. Go and run your women's team. Actually, when they step back and start to look at who attends their women's games, who is buying shirts and wants to buy shirts and things like that, and actually start looking at it is from a marketing perspective, I think that's when we'll start to see the real kick in. And I think that's only really starting to come in now, is that increase in marketing of the women's game. And I think that's the key. You've got Exeter now doing their of Panini stickers, etc. You've got the WSL2 Panini sticker albums out now. Things like that. Some of that stuff is only starting to come out now in these clubs, and I think that's when you'll start to see the kick in. Wolves this season have really increased their engagement with sponsorship and sponsoring games, corporate facility. Paying to become a mascot, getting a box, getting sort of being match day sponsor, etc. of the women's team. Peterborough United have done a huge amount for that side of things as well. Sort of this season, I think. So it's that side of direct marketing by clubs. Look at who their target audience is starting to happen, and I think that's the knock on that's going to come over the next 5 years, tying in with the increased sponsorship deals. It would not surprise me if by the end of this 3 year or 3 season strategy that we're not with it's not the Women's National League or the HSB Women's National League, because women's football is seen as a nice thing to market from a PR corporate social responsibility. It's relatively cheap, but you have big impact from it. A couple of million quid from what's it, 72 teams. If you say you put 720K into the game every year, it's not a huge amount. Call it £1 million. That will go a long way within the Women's National League, and you get your name across 6 leagues, or 6 divisions, 2 leagues, and a cup. If you chuck a bit more, you get the cup and play as well.
Yeah,
there you go.
But I think there's so many different facets to this, and it's a shame, really, because we could probably talk about this on a 24-hour podcast-a-thon quite easily, and not necessarily go over the same ground quite so often.
Sponsored pod-a-thon.
Claire says here, they don't seem to pick games relative to when the men are playing, so the games clash and that sort of thing. And talking about the 12 p.m. kickoff is killing clubs. But the thing is, there've been so many different times. They tried doing it Sunday. They tried doing it Sunday night. They tried doing it Friday night. But that's going to upset people if you've got to travel down from the south of England to the north, or vice versa. Saturdays are a difficult one. It's working on the time. And when I say the time, I mean the time of the people. Like, I refer it to Stevenage. If we've got a Stevenage home game or a Stevenage away game, and you are primarily, or have been in the past, a Stevenage men's supporter, you go out on the Saturday, you go and enjoy that. That's potentially been most of your day. Now, it depends on your circumstances. But now, I'm not married, so I couldn't sit here and suggest for 1 second that I know what it is to be a married man in that respect. But I'm fairly certain that your missus, or indeed your husband, depending on which person it is that's going to watch the football, isn't going to be delighted if regularly, every week, you're going to watch the men on a Saturday and the women on a Sunday. And locally, that's a tricky one for us. So perhaps they go to the home games for Stevenage men, and then if there's a home game for the Stevenage women, or it's a closer one because it's regional and it's not going all the way up to Carlisle or something like that, then they're more likely to go to the women's game on the Sunday. And Claire's saying here as well, and this is the second facet of it, they get 200 to 300 at Moxburgh Park, but you stick it on at the Craven Cottage, they get 2,000. And there's so many women's teams that are not playing in the ground of their club. So Stevenage don't. You know, the Lamex Stadium is the home of Stevenage, but we play at Letchworth. Even high up, these sorts of things happen. Brighton playing Crawley, which is not Brighton. Crawley is not Brighton. Crawley is Crawley. Brighton. That's like the end of it. But these teams have done these things where they source their women's team out almost a bit like Wimbledon and MK Dons to a degree. They're that different in terms of, I know, controversial, but
very controversial.
So these two facets I think are really important, because how are you going to harmonize the fact that people don't have the time? It's their weekend as well. They've got other things they need to do. They work potentially Monday to Friday. So that's really tricky. And the fact that as well, like we say, because it's not necessarily in the heart of where most clubs play, it's difficult. It was raining at the weekend. We got 79 people. We were chuffed that there were 79 because it was that wet. You started to think we'd be lucky if there's 7 or 9.
Yeah, I think the TV slots, I think it comes again back to look at your demographics of your audience. Yeah, what's the demographics of your match going fans? And don't get. I know people got their knickers in a twist slightly over the whole Glastonburyification of the WSL and the comments, and just said didn't help herself there. But I think there's an element of what she's looking to try and the mindset you're getting at is what is your match going audience? What therefore is your what's your TV audience as well? Who's attending the games? Who's watching on TV? What is therefore is your impact? What is therefore your audience and who you're trying to sell it to? Because realistically, you're getting 10% of that audience. You want to increase that piece of that pie. So therefore, you need to do that. It predominantly is young families still, families going to the women's games. So therefore, 6:35 on a Sunday night or 7:35, whatever it was on a Sunday night, Manchester United away to Arsenal, or Arsenal away to Manchester United. Actually, no, pick the wrong team. All the Man United fans live in London. It's fine. Arsenal away to Man City, or Man City away to Arsenal. Not help the families of those fans. So a lot of those people won't travel, and therefore that reduces your audience. Okay, going at 12 o'clock. The flip side is a lot of those kids. Let's be honest, those kids, if their parents are taking them to football, those kids are into football. Either be Saturday or Sunday. Those kids are probably playing football Saturday or Sunday morning. So this Saturday, I've got 10:30 kickoff. I'll be just back in time for the 12:15 Wolves versus Forest game because of where my game is the other side of the county. And that's
on the telly.
Yeah, well, I know we shouldn't be. Yeah, don't even get me started on that one. I know. But principle, and that's me just getting home in Cambridgeshire from across, so let alone getting up to the game. So therefore, same principle stands. You stick something on at 12 o'clock, kids that's their football out. That's them. They'll be going to the football. They'll be playing. So you're not coming to the game. So you need to think about and that's why the 2 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon works for women's football, because predominantly the kids are playing in the morning. Tick. The adults you can then get to the game. You can then get home from the game. That's the key. What I would say is, if you're going to have stupid kickoff times, and I include 11:55 on a Saturday lunchtime or whatever time it is this Saturday for London City Lionesses game versus Man City, or the 6:35 in the evening game, make it a derby. Make it Arsenal versus Spurs, 12 o'clock Saturday lunchtime. Big game feel. People aren't travelling too far for it because they're all local fans. So I didn't say Man United versus Man City on that one.
Do you know what I'd do? I would get rid of this blackout at 3 o'clock on a Saturday and just say only women's football can be seen on the TV Saturday at 3.
I think that might be one thing. That would work, because I think that the concern is that it takes the 3 p.m. blackout is to protect the game. I think to be perfectly honest, the thing that's killing the game is not going to be TV. It's the prices of tickets that's killing the men's game. Let's be honest. The example given up on the screen, and Wolves is similar. The cheapest ticket for Wolves is, for me, it's 35 quid. It's in an uncovered stand that's been temporary for the last 5 years, if not longer, uncovered. Am I going to stay? That I could put a big coat on and man up and take a bit of poor weather in November, December time. I ain't going to drag my kids to stand in an uncovered stand that's in the corner between two other ones for 90 minutes in tipping down rain, because they won't like it. There's no criticism of the kids. That's just, I wouldn't do it. So I'm paying for me and the family to go. I'm going to be paying the best part of 200 quid for us to go and watch a game of football. And Wolves men are not the most entertaining of things to watch at the minute. And I could go and watch Wolves women for the four of us away to home to. I mean, I'm season ticket holder, so prices are slightly different for me. But principle, for 50 quid, and I'll get a Wolves win. So something that's very rare for most Wolves fans to see at the minute. Goals, a team that cares and plays for the badge, and I'll still have change left over to buy a packet of, some chips, a cup of tea, and the program. And I've spent a quarter of what it is. That, I think, is the huge selling point as well. Yes, do I think women's football is underpriced? Yes, I do. I think a lot of women's teams underprice their product and what they're selling. I know a lot do cheaper rate if you buy online. Therefore, if you buy it on the day, you pay more, which makes sense. Get an idea of how many people you're going to be having, so that makes sense. Yeah. But I do still think that women's tickets prices are underpriced as a general rule. Certainly when you look at,
I'll never forget going to watch United against Spurs. Spurs were playing at the Hive, and it cost me more money to park my car than it did to get in and watch the football.
And that's wrong. That's morally wrong. And you look at what you pay for non-league men's games. You're easily paying 15 quid for a non-league men's game. You're telling me that St Ives versus Stourbridge and whatever, it's not even National League North, at 10 to 15 quid is better than Wolves versus Forest in the FA Cup at 7.50, 8 quid, whatever it is. Nah. Sorry, I know which one's better quality football. And there you go. The kids for quids, it is great as a one-off. I don't disagree. I think, or even a couple of quid. If you're going to do it, it's a couple of quid regularly. I think more clubs should be talking to grassroots teams and basically going, right, here you go. Here's 20 kids tickets. You adults you adults pay, but here's some kids tickets. You come in, your kids come in for free.
Exactly. Yeah.
You adults pay. Get them hooked. Your local team, we'll get you. Not necessarily mascot package, but because you can then sell that. But at the end of the game, you come down. We'll make sure you get a picture of if you all turn up in your kit. We'll make sure there's a picture of you with the manager and a couple of players or whatever. Or we'll sort something out for you. That's the sort of thing, and they'll come back then.
But I think what also really matters for that, and again, I'm seeing it at Stevenage as well, is that a lot of it depends almost on like the jeopardy and what's going on within the league. Like if you're, I'm sorry to use them as but poor old MK Dons last season when they were shipping thousands of goals per game, it felt like, it was horrific for them. Like, I'm sure the players didn't really want to be playing, let alone having the fans really come along and watch. And it's a hard thing because you will, if you've got that love affair with the club, if it's your club and you love it and it's what you do every week, you're going to turn up regardless of what's happening. But the casuals, the one that you're trying to catch, they just sort of swim past and go, listen, why would I want to go and watch us concede 8 goals every weekend? It's not something I really want to do. But when you look at how well teams, if there's no chance of them getting to the top of the league, what's the point? It's just a game of football. I'll do something else this weekend. But when you start adding we're fighting for the title, all of a sudden these bigger games are a bit bigger. And they're like, oh, better go along to that one. That's going to be a really good game. That's the sort of thing I really want to watch because it's going to determine how well we do in our season. And I think And we talk about shifting some of these teams up to make it a more competitive league. If it's opening it up to more, I mean, I think it was the Division 1 North that we were looking at in the WNL. It's just so tight. It's ridiculously tight. There's 3 or 4 clubs that could potentially win it. And all of a sudden, that's got to be creating a boost around the club for them to want to have fans, rather, that want to go and watch the game, because there's this jeopardy. If we win and they lose, we go top. This is happening. We're level on points and it's all goal difference. So I think the story matters a lot around it as well, whilst you're trying to drag people in. And within the media, which is obviously what I have to do, if you're trying to hook people into your product, you want them to see that jeopardy. You want them to see that you're doing well, because if you don't do those things, what's the story? What's going to get them to emotionally want to invest in the product? So
completely agree. And the other one was that Div 1 North, just looking again at it, it's Huddersfield versus Leeds. So they get on like a house on fire, do Huddersfield and Leeds. And Wythenshawe versus Cheadletown Stingers. And we all know how much Wythenshawe love Cheadletown Stingers, and how they also get on like a house on fire. So 4 teams battling it out, separated by about 3 points and a couple of games in hand and things like that. It's great. It's great entertainment. It's why that's what football's all about. I mean, don't get me wrong. As a neutral, you'd have loved to go and watch Wolves v Loughborough a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, Wolves won. So me as a fan, I'm happy. But at one point, Loughborough were beating bottom of the league. Loughborough were beating top of the table Wolves or thereabouts, and it was proper humdinger. And we fought back and won 3 to proper, late goal. And it's what football's about. That was 600 people who went away entertained.
correct.
A few weeks before, when it was Wolves v Calson, we were 3-0 up at half time, and the game was done. It was second half was let's go, let's get on. It was professional display. Don't get me wrong. Nothing, no criticism of the girls, but it was a job done. But already by half time,
they're big. I mean, Stevenage, Norwich City, in the FA Cup. What a game that was. Stevenage taking the lead, Norwich taking the lead, Stevenage coming back, levelling it up, looking like it's going to get a penalties, losing to the last minute goal. I've been at Stevenage now for 3-4 years, and honestly, in all that time, I couldn't tell you a game that had me so emotionally invested from start. I mean, I'm up there, meant to be the media guy, writing the match report and being on the microphone and doing all that sort of stuff. And honestly, I'm standing up and cheering as it's going along and getting off my seat. And that's what we want. You want the fans to be coming in and getting involved. And it was the crowd that was doing it to me. It wasn't so much just what was going on the pitch, but it was seeing other people getting up off their seat, gasping, and really getting into the story that was playing out in front of them. So, I think that's massive. But I wanted to get really to our sort of our last point, really, and that is that we've spoken a bit about the WNL projects that they've come through with, the vision of wanting to develop more players, coaches, refs, and the clubs, and wanting to improve the quality of WNL, helping them grow, helping them earn money, and of course letting more people know about the WNL, and they want to do that, of course, as we said, by improving the football environment, by improving the people, by making an impact on getting new fans, and also, of course, the money and the growth. And we've spoken about all of these things, and the thing is, I think these things take time, Nick, and this is the problem. And I worry a little bit about the state of where this generation is, and by this generation I mean where we are now. As a whole, because you'll know, and I'm not suggesting for 1 second that you're anywhere near my age, but you will know as well as I do that we know what it's like to be bored, like properly bored. We can't just go on the internet and let's just scroll through TikTok, and if TikTok's not enough, we'll go on Instagram, and if that's not there, then we'll pop onto Snapchat,
YouTube Shorts,
or Facebook. All of these different apps that they've got. They've got so many ways in which they can just entertain themselves just by using their mobile phone. So they're so used to having everything immediately. When we wanted to find out an answer to something really important, you had to either go and find an encyclopedia and look it up. There used to be books everywhere. One would only have A and B in it, and the next one's C and D. It would take you ages to go and find this sort of stuff. If you were lucky, you might have had the CD-ROM to put into your computer, where you could get in Carter up, and maybe you might be able to type it. Imagine that, Wikipedia, but on a CD, and you couldn't update it. If it was wrong, you just had to buy the new one. So you're so used to having all of these things ourselves when we know we have to wait. And I don't think this generation that we're in at the moment really has that. They're impatient for change. And you can understand that, because there's a lot of talk about women's rights and all of these sorts of things. And 100%, it never should have been a case that women's football was banned for as long as it did. That was men just getting really, really, really insecure about what was happening. And then just going, well, I'll tell you what, the easy way to do it is to just stop you from playing. And they played a card that they shouldn't have played. And then 1971 comes around. They're finally in a position where they can start to play again. But they're trying to pull back 50 years of a gap of training, of having clubs exist, of having the ability to do those things. And even when they did vote them in, they still weren't able to play at any decent level. They were literally at entry level and just starting out and really just trying to exist. So we've got this big gap that we're trying to get closed down. Do you, I suppose, agree with me on this one, that at the minute there's just too many people that want that gap to shrink too quickly, and it's got to grow organically? And I'm one of those who wants to see it grow. I would love to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden, you know, things are really getting into place and we're seeing more teams in the top division. But there's so many different things that are happening. You know, you've got the ACLs, for example. We need to get an answer to this. Why is it that there are so many ACLs in the women's game, and how do we fix that? You start looking just at the mental and physical health of women and how they should be able to play. Even stupid things like, and I say stupid insofar as it shouldn't be that difficult, not making them wear white shorts if they're not feeling comfortable. You know, simple things that make easy changes, and they're not necessarily being done yet. So when you've got all of these problems going on, do we just need to be a bit more patient and recognise that women's football is growing, but it's got a really big gap that it's got to try and close? And by doing it too quickly, pushing it too quickly, it can become almost like a superficial thing. And what I mean by that, as you can see, I wear glasses. If I break my glasses, and a really good example of this was when I told one of the kids at the school, don't kick the ball, we're stopping now, and one of them larruped it as hard as I think he's ever kicked a ball, smashed me straight in the face and broke my glasses into 3 separate pieces, which was entertaining because I had to drive home. And so I'm getting the super glue, trying to get everything to hold, and it held, got me home, no problem whatsoever, but it didn't hold forever. It's going to break. And my worry is that if we put things together too quickly, it's going to be like the super glue glasses, and that things will break and we end up in a really bad situation. So what do you reckon? I've rambled a bit. What do you make of my little ramble?
I think you 100% have genuine concerns. I think all progress. I'll just quickly read Claire. So it's going to take a long time for the better. Yes, agree, Claire. Progress and development isn't linear. You know, as a coach, as a football coach, I know that the kids I work with aren't all going to go like that. It doesn't show on the camera, but aren't going to all go in a straight sort of horizontal, you know, sort of a line, you know, diagonal line up the graph of improvements. They'll go up a bit, drop off or plateau, come up a bit more, etc., and slowly grow. And there'll be spurts and sort of stagnation is a bit harsh, but that principle of, you know, plateau out and carry on. And the same will happen with women's football. I think a lot of people have been critical of the FA for lack of progress since England won the Euros the first time round. And there aren't, and almost that we didn't run at that point. And my view has always been that the success of the Lionesses in sort of 3 years ago, whatever it was, isn't to be told now. It's to be told in 10 years' time, because it's the kids, particularly the daughters or the girls at my daughter's age, who are inspired by that event, will be in 10 years' time, 10 to 15 years' time, will be the players for the grassroots or the adult clubs in 10, 15 years time. So that's the generation. That's almost that bubble that will come through. And when that sort of comes through, that'll be the boom year for women's football. But it's 10 years down the line. And I can see when I look certainly around where I am in Cambridgeshire, the growth of girls' football is in that sort of currently under 12s and below age groups compared to the slightly older age groups. And I think there's a few more under 14s, but it's that eight sort of that round that under 14s, under 12s downwards bracket is when it starts to really grow, because that's the Lionesses generation. And I think it's that, can we keep it sort of growing organically at this point, so we increase the TV audiences, find the right slot for it, grow the match going fan base, expand the league so there are teams there ready for them to come into. I think that's the key over the next 10 years. Yeah, agreed, Claire. And I think there are teams who can help speed that process up by investing. And that includes the FA in that as well. I think it's been benefit. I mean, we've been crying out for expansion of the WSL for God knows how many years. It's been needed, and I think the WSL2 expansion will need to come fairly soon as well. And I think you almost need to give it sort of 2 years now of the WSL2 being, or the WSL being 14 teams, and then expand to 16 and 14. Yeah, 16 in the WSL, 14 in WSL2, and go again with that expansion and give it 2-3 years. 2 seasons, so next season, year after at least, then announce you're going to be looking to expand again, and then do again. So you get up to about 18 teams in each. And I think that will help. But it all comes back down to finding that balance, because there's no point expanding WSL2, WSL, and pulling these teams up out of the FA Women's National League, etc., if that means that your county leagues are slowly decimated, and because they haven't got enough teams there. And I think at that point you need to look at, it comes back to the thing we were talking about at the very beginning of this show, FA Cup prize money. At that point, the impact of FA Cup prize money at that point would be huge. And I think that's going to be the key at that point, because I think that will give you, or give teams the money, and therefore the investment to grow as well, and therefore stand up and support those girls getting into women's football. I think you'll see more and more. I also think, give it 10 years, some of the old farts at some of these clubs will also peg their pop their clogs and be 6 feet under, and because there's still a lot of sexism and misogyny around men's football, and therefore that's stopping teams from setting up women's, about clubs setting up women's teams, etc. And I think, as I said, give it 10 years, they'll have given up and retired away from the football club, or they'll have literally popped their clogs, and therefore there'll be less of an issue about setting up a women's team. And I think you'll suddenly find that we'll have more women's teams coming through at that point as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's all fair points. Listen, it's going to be really interesting, as I say, and we could potentially have gone on for hours and hours and hours longer. But sadly, we've both got, jobs that we've eventually got to go to, and beauty sleep that we both require in order to maintain these dashing good looks that we have got. So, yeah, very important that we see some changes. And as we said at the start, this is the start of a 3-year plan for the WNL. We're not expecting to see all of those shoots just yet. But it will be very interesting, and we'll be keeping an eye on it. Don't be thinking we're not. So if you're watching from the WNL, there's people watching you. We'll make sure we are seeing some form of response and some sort of growth within the WNL, especially there. So it should be really good. And yes, Fulham, just imagine if you do manage to get yourself past Bournemouth, you could well end up facing Wolves, providing they've got past Nottingham Forest in the next round. And if you do, then yes, you probably will end up on the telly. But don't forget, you'll also be up against the WSL side, so there's a very real chance that you just get ignored so that they can get thrown on. You never know. It'd be interesting, actually. Do you think if you had someone like Altrincham making it through with a miraculous win against York City and they somehow draw Chelsea away, or Chelsea at home even, it'd be interesting to see whether or not they'd go with the fairy tale story of putting Altrincham against Chelsea. I'm not convinced they would, because they reckon they'd probably lose by about 10. But
and again, I think that is it. It's what grows the game as a whole, and it's thinking without wishing to use this the cliches sort of phrase too much. Looking at the bigger picture for the growth of the game, sticking. It's a game where you're going to get 10-0 thrashing of somebody isn't great for the game. Sticking a crowd, TV cameras in front of 20 people and a couple of dogs isn't great for the growth of the game. And I think that's, and just quickly linked into that, it's why Wolves as a club put the game against Man United back at Telford. There was a lot of push. Oh, put it at Molineux, should be at Molineux. No, we'd rather have a packed out New Bucks Head. That was the highest attendance at New Bucks Head last season, not for Telford United, but for Wolves women versus Man United women. Pack it out, get it loud, make it a spectacle, make it look good on TV. Because 6,000 people, so even if you got it up to 10,000 people at Molineux, wouldn't sound and look as good as 6,000 people in the New Bucks Head. That's the truth, so I think it's that what's good for the TV cameras, and that will help grow the game as a whole. Unfortunately,
I agree with the growth bit, but then I had the same conversation thinking about. Yeah, and I know this is lower league lingo, but United, they can do the same thing. They can put 10,000 people into LSV, which is great. They might only get 20,000 at Old Trafford. That's still double. That's 2 LSVs, which is double the income, double the, all that jazz.
But you pay quadruple the costs because you got to steward the whole thing.
It can be. So it's as broad as it is long, but just a little counter to that as well. Yeah. But anyway, it was the epilogue, so we shouldn't really be countering things like that. Bad hosting by myself there to throw a question into the end. But it's been brilliant. Thank you, Claire, for sticking with us all the way through the show. It's a real pleasure to have you on. If you are watching this, please do like, follow, subscribe, do all of those sorts of things. It's incredibly helpful when you do so, especially for this show. It's been lovely to be the award winners and do all that sort of stuff for the silver, but what really matters is that actually we're getting this show out there, because as the WNL say, they want more eyes on these lower league teams, and we're just trying our best to get it out there. We're not suggesting for 1 second it's the new match of the day for lower league, but it is the new match of the day for the lower leagues. Just no actual football for us to watch, but that's a dream. Who knows, maybe one day we'll be getting people sending in their footage for us to be able to show, and that would be quite something. You never know what could happen. But yes, thank you Lucy as well, from Sutton United. Good luck with your match against Chatham Town. Fun fact, used to live in Sittingbourne, and Chatham was like the naughty child of Kent in that particular section. So going to be supporting you, Sutton, there. So good luck in that game. But it's been a pleasure to have you all with us. Obviously, next week is getting ever closer to Christmas, so I'm sure we'll have one more lower league lingo within us. Monday night will, of course, be our final show before the Christmas holidays and until the new year, potentially. So we're doing our end-of-year awards. So do come and join us on Monday night for that. Come and join us again for lower league lingo, where we'll look back over the FA Cup, maybe throw in a bit of Tier 5, bit of end of year stuff. Who knows? It's very difficult to work out what we're going to do when you're not sure who's going to be there. John might be there. He could be drowning in pigs in blankets. Gareth might be there. He might still be crying about the fact that he's not in the FA Cup. Stu might be there, but you never know. People might not go to sleep. I will be here, because if I'm not, we can't do the show. So that's a given. But there we go. One way or the other, we'll be there. It's been a pleasure to have you all. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate talking with you tonight. Thank you a lot for watching. And we'll see you next week. Night all.